In 2015, Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party won a majority government with a promise of sunny ways. The rookie Liberal MP for Whitby, Celina Caesar-Chavannes, was among those smiling and looking to a bright new era. But not even 4 years later, she announced that she would not seek another term and left the party to sit as an independent. What happened? Celina Caesar-Chavannes explains in her book. It's called Can You Hear Me Now? How I Found My Voice and Learned to Live with Passion and Purpose. And she joins us now from Whitby. Hi, Celina.
Hi, Nam. Oh my goodness, it's so great to be on with you.
It's so nice to have you back on the show. We've got lots to get into, so let's get into it. So you start in the book talking about your childhood. You're from Grenada. You immigrated to Canada in the late 1970s when you were just 2, and soon after arriving, you say you learned, and I quote, "A Caribbean family's unwritten rules were very different from the rules from the other families around us." What were those rules?
Oh my goodness. Well, where do I start? We didn't really eat out. Family was really close, but there was also the corporal punishment side, which I talk about in the book, and it was something that I think it didn't define us as a family, but knowing that my parents came from Grenada to here to make a better life, they wanted to instill that discipline that was required to, I guess, live in the big country of Canada. And so they kept their family really close, but ruled with a heavy hand.
And in the book, you talk about your love of swearing. And from a very young age, you knew who you were. But after some struggles through university, you started a successful healthcare research management company. You chose not to include any images of yourself on the website or ads. How come?
So working in healthcare research, and especially in brain or neurological research, I knew that a lot of those individuals were male and they were white male. And I didn't want to contend with them seeing a picture of me as a young Black female about to manage this multi-million-dollar project. I wanted the service that I was offering to speak for itself, and then have to deal with maybe they don't want to work with me. But by the time I showed up, the contracts were already executed, and then we could just start working without the distraction of my race or my gender being an issue or playing an issue in getting the contract.
Did you have any situations where you did meet them and there was a reaction to you?
Yeah, that happened a couple of different times where I'd walk into a meeting for the first time with a client. And of course, they're expecting Resolve Research Solutions to be run by whoever they're thinking in their head. I walk into the room, I'm usually well dressed, put together, and I go in to say hello. And clients would often, kind of shoo me away and say, wait your turn. And I just sit back and wait. And eventually they'll come to recognize that it's the person that's sitting there is the actual person that they're supposed to meet with. And it'll be wide-eyed, like, oh my goodness, I wasn't kind of expecting you.
And then at some point you decide, well, when Stephen Harper's finance minister, Jim Flaherty, died suddenly in 2014, you decided to run for his Whitby, Ontario seat in a by-election. You write that you weren't familiar with politics and that your daughter was actually helping you understand civics. Why did you decide to run as a Liberal?
So I had always voted Liberal. Of course, we know with many Caribbean families coming to Canada under the previous Trudeau meant that we were sort of aligned or had some allegiance to the Trudeau government. And so from very early, we had always voted Liberal. I continued voting Liberal. And I thought that it would be the best platform for me to run under based on some of the initiatives that they wanted to put forward, that they had in their platform, but also things that I knew they had done in the past that really aligned with my values and my belief of government helping in terms of the social safety net that it provides. And so running as a Liberal was the best thing that I thought suited me.
Do you, I know this isn't in the book, but I just wanted to follow up because in politics, there's this assumption that people, like Black people, vote a certain way. They vote for Liberals. And sometimes I wonder if there's an opportunity where conservatives are not paying attention to the Black community, or where Liberals will take advantage of the Black community because that vote is guaranteed.
I think on both fronts that is the case, and I think that we saw Leslyn Lewis, of course, run for the leadership of the Conservative Party and fare very well. So I think there is this sort of groundswell of change around the impression or around the sort of belief that Black communities across Canada will firmly align with the Liberal Party. I think if the Liberals aren't paying attention and the Conservatives aren't using this opportunity, that they're going to be facing a problem. And then, of course, we have Anna May Paul, who's the leader of the Green Party. So there's going to be some challenges for the Liberals in the future.
Well, you decided to run again in 2015 after you lost the by-election. And when you arrived and you won, and when you arrived at Parliament Hill, you say that you were met with the frozen glares of white men who were disgruntled to see you. Why did you feel that way?
So I don't know, like when you walk through the halls of Parliament Hill, you see many pictures of individuals, of course, white men who have been leaders in the country. There's very little that depicts Blackness and Black communities and the contributions of Black communities, in fact, many communities of color, to Canada within the walls of Parliament. So when you're walking through these spaces, and remember, Nam, these spaces were designed on exclusionary principles. They were never designed for women to be there, for women of color, for Black women. So when you're seeing all these pictures of white men glaring at you, it kind of makes you question and wonder, is the space really as inclusive as it could be?
During your first meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau, you were his former parliamentary secretary. This is after he made you the parliamentary secretary. He asked you if you trusted his judgment. What did you tell him?
No.
What was his reaction?
Well, I noticed the tension sort of go up in the room. And you have to understand that, as parliamentary secretary, I'm thinking this person wants me to be honest. And I've been married. At that time, I was married to my husband for over 15 years. There are some times that I don't trust his judgment. And the fact that the Prime Minister is asking me this question, and I'd only known him for a very short period of time, I wanted him to know that I'm going to challenge him sometimes. I'm going to challenge his views, his policy, his perspectives, because I don't necessarily trust his judgment. I don't know him.
What was his reaction to you when you said, I think what you said was, no?
I was like, nah, like, really? So the tension in the room, I felt that tension in the room kind of rise a little bit. And the subsequent question was, why not? And I had heard from other individuals, Liberals or other people in media and otherwise, talking about how the ministers who were put in cabinet had helped him on his leadership campaign or helped during the election. And I said, well, because of that reason, that's why I don't trust your judgment. It's too transparent. You should have been a little bit more clear about who you were putting in cabinet and not so transparent around, putting the people that helped you. Like it looks like nepotism. And I don't really think that they appreciated that sort of straight talk, these are the facts kind of person.
You would send emails to the Prime Minister's office. How often were your emails responded to?
That maybe once or twice. It was interesting because as parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, I really wanted to ensure that I was supplementing any of the work that I was doing to his agenda to make sure that I was filling in the gaps, that I was not just sort of being like this figurehead of a person, but actually working to help remove
You
some
say
of this
token,
workload.
right? You felt like a token?
Yes. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And these are one of the things that I said right from the beginning. So before he asked me that question about trusting his judgment, I walked in and I said, I do not want to be. I hope that I wasn't chosen for your as your parliamentary secretary to fill any racial or gender gaps that you have in your cabinet. I'm perfectly happy being the member of parliament for Whitby. And I was very clear that I didn't want to be tokenized. I'm highly educated. I ran a successful business. I could be strategic and I could help fill gaps in the work that he's doing. And that's what I expected the role to do. It turned out that it was not that role at all.
You even sent an email saying you're resigning, but I'll let people read the book to find out what happened. I think it felt like you were getting frustrated, even sometimes maybe angry with the lack of communication, and that the PM wasn't delegating work to you or having you attend events on his behalf. But some could say that, a risk-averse PMO might not trust an MP to represent them, who flat out said she didn't trust the Prime Minister's judgment. What do you say to them?
Well, I say to them that what would you expect someone to say? Would you want them to just be the person that says yes to every single thing that you put forward? Or do you want somebody to challenge you? Again, this is not, the local barista, the barista at our local coffee shop. I mean, all respect due to baristas. This is the leader of a G7 country who, in my opinion, you would want someone who's going to challenge you. You'd want someone who's not going to say yes to you all the time. You'd want someone who's going to provide that dissent and that strategy and that difference of opinion. But if that conversation did happen where it was, if they don't trust she doesn't trust my judgment, we don't want her, then I think some of that fallout we saw with the government towards the end, especially around SNC and some of the other scandals that have come to fruition.
And at some point, you decide that you're not going to run in the next election. And when you told the Prime Minister's office that you weren't going to run in the next election, you got an immediate phone call from the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Here's how you describe it in the book. I said, "I hope you can appreciate, not today or tomorrow or a year from now, the impact that the past year has had on my family." With those words, the Prime Minister lost it. "Oh my God, Celina, oh my God, I can't believe that you're telling me to understand." He insisted I should appreciate him for supporting me in the by-election. He pretty much yelled that he was tired of people reminding him of his privilege and ranted on about how he and his family had also been affected. When he was done speaking, I made him understand that I was not a child he could correct. What word did you use to make him understand that you were not a child that he could correct?
I think this is a family show, Nam, so I'm not sure that I will repeat exactly what I said to him. But the tone that he spoke to me in, I made sure that it was responded to in kind. And I added a little bit more colorfulness to my language, because I wanted him to know not only not only that I wasn't a child, but I also represented 130,000 people in the town of Whitby. And how dare he speak to me as a representative of those people in that manner? And I was not going to let him get away with it.
It's interesting because I don't know how many situations where you have a Black woman interviewing another Black person in this situation, because I understand what it's like to be one and the only in a room, and the stereotypes that come with being a Black individual. In the book, you wrote about worrying about being defined as an angry Black woman. When you were in those kind of situations, did you find that anger was a useful or was it a detrimental emotion for you?
So this is what I speak about in the book. I speak about us bringing of all our flaws, our mistakes, our guilt, our shame, our hurts to bear, and adding them and augmenting them with our strengths, our joys, our pleasures, our everything that makes us who we are built into all of those different facets. And while I tried to hide sort of that image where I would push against the status quo, I would try to articulate my conversations in such a way that I would want things to happen. I was afraid that I'd be labeled. But at some point, you just got to let it go. You just got to be who you are, because that is the only way that systems and policies and organizations could change. It can't change if we keep trying to fit into a mold. At some point, we just have to be who we are. And if we're labeled, so be it.
There's a line in the book where you say that you were aware that as a Black woman, you had to be honest, because if you weren't
Yes,
honest, it could come back to bite you. Was that part of it?
absolutely. Well, absolutely. I mean, I don't think that we have a choice, though. I remember I signed up to a government that said they were doing government differently, that they were going to be open and transparent, that diversity was their strength, that feminism was their core, and I showed up buying that product. I showed up understanding that if I didn't put an intersectional feminist lens, which I value in terms of everything that we did in terms of policy, we wouldn't get to a point where we're being equitable. We wouldn't achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve as a government. We came in again with 180 plus individuals, a majority government. There were things that we could have done that we didn't end up doing. And I had no choice but to really push against that status quo. And I think at the end it cost me, but would I do it again the same way? Absolutely.
What did it cost you?
Well, it really cost, I think, first with leaving my job as parliamentary secretary for international development. It cost me that, a job that I truly loved. It cost me, being a part of a liberal party, a party system that I really value. Like there's still some tenets of the liberal party that I value, that I think that serves our society, serves our communities. But I had to leave that because of the internal sort of friction that existed within that party system. And then ultimately leaving politics. I enjoyed being the member of parliament for Whitby. I enjoyed the work that I was able to do on behalf of my constituents. But inside of that infrastructure, I knew that there wasn't something that fit well with who I was, the values that I bring forward, and the principles that I stand by.
And in the book, you do write about some of additional struggles you had as one of the few Black people there. And you've been accused of seeing racism everywhere. I think you've received a lot of tweets about that. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, I think the response came 2 years later in 2020, where we're dealing with global focus on racial inequality. Right now, everybody seems to be woke, but it seems like, and I know that, Black people have been awake for a very long time. And so the things that I was talking about in 2018 around race and racism and looking at systemic racism that exists in our democratic institutions, the hub of our democracy in this country, and how it spreads to different parts of our systems, that conversation has come home to roost, so to speak, in 2020, where now we're forced to have these conversations about it.
Community is very important to you, and you write about this in the book. And did you see your main job as representing the people of Whitby who actually elected you, and they're a majority white suburban Ontario riding, or representing the needs of Black Canadians across Canada?
I think that my main focus was on people with multiple intersecting identities who I know need government supports the most. We are now in a pandemic in 2020 where a highlight is clearly being shone on the disparities that exist with racialized people, with women, with people with disabilities. And those are the individuals that at the heart of everything I did was at the center of that. And those are the individuals that are going to be further marginalized by not just racial inequality or sexism or homophobia or ageism, but our pandemic and climate change and the refugee crisis and all of these other political, social, and economic shocks to our system. Those are the individuals that need us the most, and those are the ones that we should be fighting for the most.
I wonder too if it could be both, because in the book you write about the people that you did represent in Whitby, and some of them being worried about, what about my white sons? And I wonder if the same would have been asked if somebody, if it was a white individual, a white man, maybe advocating for the same things that you were advocating for. Why couldn't it have been both? Is it something that maybe you just weren't able to do because of what you look like?
Well, I don't think that is necessarily true. First of all, that comment didn't come from anyone in Whitby. I just want to be clear on that. That came from somebody else. But whether I was advocating for changes to the small business tax credit, challenging Bill Morneau on some of that, which impacted a lot of residents of Whitby, small business owners, I was able to do both. The highlight, though, the things that people focused on was when I spoke about racism, when I spoke about intersectionality, when I spoke about equity. That's what tended to get people really riled up. But was I still challenging our government on policies that were disproportionately negatively impacting people in my community? Absolutely. Sending messages to Bill Morneau around the small business tax credit that had physicians in my riding being negatively impacted, small businesses. You better believe I did. So I could have done both. It was just that media, and I guess in terms of social media, that was highlighted the most.
After you chose to leave the Liberals, you became an independent. You said
Yeah.
staying them would have meant subordinating your values. But can you appreciate that for a party politics to work, politicians have to kind of put their own individual, they have to allow their individual emotions to take a back seat, that a party has to be united in order to affect change?
Absolutely. I could totally get on board with that. However, um, I think that there are some times where at no point can you get rid of or put your principles on that back seat. I quote Clayton Christensen in my book and talk about his essay on how will you measure your life. And he indicates that, it's easier to stand by your principles 100% of the time than it is to stand by your principles 98% of the time. And I know to the people that elected me, that I promised that I would be authentic, that I would challenge, that I would do government done differently. The people that lived in Whitby, the people that I knocked on doors and had great conversations with, I know that they would appreciate that kind of pushback, that kind of standing in the integrity of yourself, and integrity that I think many people in this community have. And I was not going to put that to the side in order to have a party that claimed to want to do politics differently, claims to want to be diverse and feminist and uh, open and transparent. And I think many times we have seen that they have not.
Um, you in the book, I mentioned at the beginning, you said that you like to swear, and during this pandemic, I've discovered my love of that. But in the book, you also write about how you're a crier, and reading this book
Yeah.
and the experiences that you went through in kind of like a concentrated period of time. What was it like for you emotionally, personally, even with your family? Because when you were in office, you did receive a lot of hate mail against your family as well, death threats. What was it like for you to go through this process of, I guess, reliving those moments and writing about them?
This was a very cathartic process. My editor at Penguin Random House Canada, her name's Anne Collins. She lives in Whitby as well. And she said to me, at one point when I was writing, she said, Celina, do you want this book to hurt or to heal? And it was really important for me to make sure that this book was had a lot of healing in it. I cried a lot when I wrote it, either talking about my early parts of my life, my marriage, my running my business, my children, or politics. I cried a lot, sort of digging deep and getting out all those parts of you that you think you bury away or you think you're not bothered by, and putting them on the page is a very cathartic process. But then when you work with someone like Anne, who's able to say, okay, now let's shape all that hurt and guilt and shame and mistakes into a healing process, into words that heal. That's, I think, what the outcome of this book is, and why I think it's resonating with so many people, and they could see themselves in it, because it's not just about hurt, it's about healing.
It's a great book. Congratulations. And I think it's also kind of like about leadership, how to move in this world. And your husband and your family, you know, just the foundation you have is incredible. Congratulations on a terrific read, Celina. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Nam. I appreciate it.
Really
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Be well and stay safe.
You too.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.